Hi and welcome to the Financial Fox. Today we are going to discuss what is easily the most controversial topic of the moment, which is Brexit. But we are also going to talk about the financial market and also some good investment at the moment. For almost 3 years now, the UK political scene has been thrown into turmoil by Brexit. So after countless party disputes, disagreement, deal talks and general exhaustion, it seems that UK should be leaving the EU in the summer. However, Brexit's uncertainty has not only touched the political scenes, the UK's economy, financial market and its forecast, but it has definitely drained people, society and the economy. So in today's episode, I'm going to be discussing the post-Brexit business scenario with my special guest, James Bevan, asset manager and chief investment officer at CCLA, the special UK fund manager for charities and public sector. How are you, James?
Very, very well. Hugely looking forward to this difficult chat we're going to have.
Okay, so James, you have been working in the public sector for many, many years. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling buoyant and optimistic about the capacity to pick good investments in what I think are going to be difficult conditions, but I've almost given up with the politicians. All they do is argue, no sign of any agreement yet.
What do you think is going to happen now?
Well, I still think that there will be a deal because I suspect that the majority of parliamentarians feel that a no deal is the worst outcome, and Mrs May's deal looks like to be the closest they will get to some sort of deal that they can eventually rally behind.
I mean, the UK has been tied up to the bloc for over 40 years, for everything, trades, regulation. Now, how you can really unpick everything, how you can break, everything up and, try to stand alone and start everything from the beginning, is that going to be a challenge that really the UK government can take?
It's a huge challenge, and I think that the problem is that if we were to go back to first principles, most people in Britain say, look, actually, we quite like the idea of free trade because we want to sell, we want to be able to buy, we like open markets. We also want, in principle, to have the free flow of services, we want the free flow of money. We don't want nasty restrictions and borders and everything else. However, most British people say that they really want to be subject to the regulations and jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. They want to be able to determine everything here in the UK. And there is no system in the world that offers this panoply of opportunity, on the one hand giving us economic access to Europe, on the other hand letting us do our own thing. It was always pie in the sky that we could get this sort of agreement, because the Europeans realistically will say, look guys, if you want to sell to us, they have to be able to comply with our standards. I think that's entirely proper and appropriate, but as soon as you've said that, then regulation is passed straight to Europe.
Yeah, so let's analyze a little bit this Brexit. How do you think it has impacted the market? Because we saw even in the housing market, everywhere the economy has suffered. We can't hide that.
Well, interestingly, I think that what one might observe is a great deal of fatigue setting in associated with the extreme and ongoing uncertainty. So markets actually are not pricing the sort of bad news that a no-deal Brexit would otherwise imply. For example, if you were to take the government securities market, it seems potty, does it not, that we would lend money to the British government for a 10-year period to receive a return of about 1% with no clarity as to what the outlook will be for the British economy, the British currency, or indeed the British government. Now, against that backdrop, when I think about the equity markets, I think, okay, we might go ahead with Brexit. What happens if we get a change of government? I think the British utility sector is overpriced, because what it is essentially saying is Mrs May is going to stay in government, we will have a Tory administration, we will not have Mr Corbyn. If Mr Corbyn were in, the taxation, the confiscation of assets, the compensation of gilt-edged securities would mean in principle that we should have much lower prices of a number of companies.
Okay, let's look at a scenario where we are going to have a deal with the EU. How do you think that is going to impact the market, the UK economy?
A positive deal with the EU would, I think, in the near term lead to a very significant pickup of investment. So for a couple of quarters, we could have a much stronger economy. And I don't think it is fanciful to suggest that in 2020, the UK economy could, in theory, be the fastest growing economy within the G7. However, we have a backlog of a slowing global economy. We clearly have the aftermath of the Fed's rhetoric and tightening last year. We still have problems in China. Therefore, I don't think that we have a propitious global background, and I think that given that the UK economy is fragile in compositional terms, meaning we don't make enough, we're overly dependent on domestic services, the long-term outlook for the UK economy is still quite poor.
And also, I mean, lots of people, they've been waiting to take an investment decision just to see what the Brexit outlook will be. So I think lots of people, they are still sitting quite a lot of cash. So investors have been cashing out.
If I were a global investor and I was saying, okay, so I want to buy some risk assets, I want to participate in long-term growth, I want to become more wealthy in absolute or relative terms, why would you give the UK a special place in your heart, in your mind, in your wallet? Surely you would say, I want to go out and buy the world's best companies. Let's say you bought Amazon as a typical example. What UK company competes for shelf space with Amazon in terms of long-term profit participation, real growth of a company? Now, it seems to me that the UK has to justify its place in a portfolio on merit, not on emotion. For me, there are only a handful of companies that really merit that consideration. Companies like Diageo, Unilever, at the smaller companies and Ashtead Group, whose business is primarily in the States. Those are companies that I think deserve to be in portfolios now, never mind Brexit.
And what do you think will be the transition period? I mean, even if there is a deal, how long do you think that will take, and how this transition period will look like?
Well, I think the transition period is going to be rocky and it will be relatively long term, because let us say that we agree to a customs union and therefore there will be the free flow of goods and services across borders. What that must mean is that British goods comply with European standards, otherwise they will not be permitted to enter. Now, does that mean that we will sign up to the European rule book, or will we have to self-certify at the border that the goods that we are otherwise wanting to sell don't actually pass muster? That's a big issue.
Yeah, that's a big problem. But also I think the influx, or actually the intelligence coming from Europe. I mean, we can't hide that lots of great people, lots of great minds are coming to the UK, injecting not only, their business, but also injecting idea to a country. So if this Brexit is going to go ahead, many European people with a great idea won't come to the UK to start the business. So there will be kind of a limitation that maybe could impact, for instance, the technology sector, which is a booming sector at the moment.
Of course, I agree with you. And actually, when I look at the demographic challenges across a number of developed markets, we need young people coming into the UK so that we have adequate balance and ultimately vibrancy of economic activity. Never mind the cultural and social implications of vibrancy, which is so important to having a civilized society. I completely accept those points.
I mean, we know many people, they come here just to study at Oxford and Cambridge and then they stay. How many European people, they came here and they stay because they saw an opportunity in a country that is moving faster than their own country, and being facilitated like that, they could actually, run their idea quickly rather than stay in their own country. So,
we have a very long history of welcoming people into this country and building a culture which is more than the sum of the parts. I completely concede that issue. However, if we have Brexit with closed borders, you are quite correct to say that we will lose some of that vibrancy, some of that open-mindedness that we have had as an economy. We will have to think of new ways. And I do think that the resident population of Britain does have entrepreneurial vigour. It does have the opportunity to create wealth. What we have to get away from is the compositional challenge that we have had really since the late 70s and early 80s, where we have remorselessly outsourced to low-cost parts of the world in exchange for lower prices and the reduction of union power. Now, these are huge political issues which are not going to resolve in the near term.
And that could be actually quite a good way to challenge, the UK population as well, to get more entrepreneurial.
Well, if we want to spend more money, we have to have more productivity. Yeah. We have to measure productivity. We're going to spend money economically. The problem is that the industries we want to grow domestically in the UK, areas like the health service, areas like teaching, productivity is anathema. People want more nurses per patient, more teachers per child. That means less productivity, not more productivity. So paying for these bills is going to have to require a faster moving economy, a lot more technology.
How about, lower employment, let's say, the waitressing. So this is a big problem because nowadays it's taken by lots of European, they are paying low cost, some young people coming from Italy, from, Eastern Europe. Now they are going to come back to their own country country. So how can you really pay what you were going to pay an Italian or an Eastern European? Can you pay a UK citizen? I think, you know, I'm not really sure. They will probably ask for more money.
In principle, you can. However, the reality of the demographic changes that are underfoot within the UK is we just don't have enough young people to fill all those jobs, even if we can afford to pay them, because we have an ageing population. The baby boomers are moving into retirement. The younger population is smaller in scale as it goes through. Therefore, more people are going to be claiming rather than contributing, and that is a big problem for societies. We see this already in China. We see this emerging in America. These are vast changes underfoot. Germany solved the problem by inviting a very large number of non-domestic people into its economy in order to rebalance its population. Well done, Germany, for recognising the need to do that. But it's been oh so unpopular with Germans who say, well, hang on a minute, these aren't German people. Then they are blind to the reality that they need an influx of young people to get that demographic balance.
Okay, let's talk about also outside the bloc, because, you know, the government is not only trying to get a deal with the EU, but, you know, Theresa May made a trip to Africa last year. You know, there are MPs there going to Southeast Asia to see wherever could be other partnership with other countries in the world. How do you think that is important for the UK, and how much they can leverage on those kind of partnerships?
Oh, I think it's deeply important. I would have to say that the volume of trade that is done outside of the EU is a small fraction of what is done within the EU. So if we have a bad deal with the EU, I'm sorry, but none of these deals are going to make up enough to justify having left in pure economic terms. Therefore, we need a longer perspective of the merits of having left, which must be more to do with the unshackling of entrepreneurial vigour. I mean, you speak to most Europeans and they would say the bureaucracy in Brussels is such that it does stifle economic growth in economies like Italy, where after all you've had in Italy 2 decades now of virtually no growth.
Yeah.
However, if I were to think about the opportunities for the UK outside of the EU, when we have left the EU and we are free to negotiate, obviously we will find that there are deals to be done. My challenge, however, is that the time that we have left to negotiate these deals is too short for us to be confident that these deals will be of good quality, will actually leave the British economy in a good place.
Yeah, and also, I mean, this time it actually drained people because these, the MP, they are exhausted. They have been under pressure for, you know, too much time. You know, it's just too much. They're probably not going to have even an Easter break now.
Well, they don't deserve one, frankly, because they've had 3 years nearly to sort this out. I have no sympathy for politicians who've been unable to get the job done. I think, however, when one thinks about the big opportunities, one shouldn't forget that the growth of the middle class in Asia is going to be an enormously important trend over the next few decades. So I'm looking at companies like AIA and Prudential selling life assurance into Asia as companies that look really interesting in terms of their long-term profits flow. On the other hand, I'm really nervous about some of the investment banks that are operating in the region because the Chinese banks are buying business of their years back. They are buying contracts which I would regard as non-commercial. Now, for anyone who wins a contract, I worry are going to be well overpaying.
I mean, London has been the centre of finance for a long, long time. Do you think the Brexit is going to disrupt that?
I think that it is
an
issue in a pan-European context because clearly there are a number of banks who said, well, do you know what, if we're going to issue euro-denominated paper, we want to be either in Germany or in France. We've had Frankfurt, we've had Paris doing the rounds, handing out the cards, saying, guys, you know, they're great cities, come on board. But actually, I look at the rule of law in the UK. So much of global business is subject to UK contract law, which is respected. I still think that there are going to be many entities who say, guess what, we're going to stay in London because we want contract law, we want the facilities, we want the services, we want the embedded brain power of people who participate in markets on our side, helping us in the capital market system.
Okay, let's leave a Brexit on a side. Now, I wanted to pick your brain on 2 subjects. The first one is blockchain, and the other one is cannabis, which are 2 hot things. I mean, blockchain has been, we talk a lot over the last few years. Now it looks like the market has been a little bit settled, you know, and everything readjust. But the blockchain is a technology that is here, is going to stay, is going to develop, and is probably going to change the way that people make any transaction. So what's your views on that and how companies are embracing blockchain?
I think blockchain is hugely important and will be vastly influential in terms of what lies ahead for companies and economies. I think the capacity to understand where products come from and where they are going to, and indeed their entire history, is really important in terms of trade, in terms of fairness, in terms of contract, but equally proving title, for example, in New York property, proving to be so much simpler with blockchain. And I would say, however, that there are two rather separate applications of blockchain. There are private blockchain groups between banks, which are increasing the capacity for banks to make profits that are sustainable, enhancing margins, and ultimately very good for bank businesses. There are the public blockchain businesses, obviously, which lead to the cryptocurrencies. I worry there that actually the processing time is now a real issue for a number of them, and that the pricing of the currencies is still vagary. It is still, to me, a speculation rather than a reality.
Yeah, it's still quite volatile. But do you think the government, what do you think is the role of the government in actually educating people about blockchain? Because, you know, we are in the market, we know what it's about, but most of the people outside there, they still don't understand, and they still align, blockchain is Bitcoin, but actually, you know, that is completely wrong.
Of course it is, and I think that the important issue is that people should recognise that blockchain is a mechanism for proving a transaction through a complex but complete process is really important to trying to reduce cybercrime. If you said to me what is the single biggest risk to the modern digital economy, it is cybercrime. Blockchain represents a huge step forward trying to combat and control that risk. And I don't think that we need in the high street to understand a great deal about it any more than if I lift the bonnet of my car, I have a clue what's going on.
Yeah. Finally, let's talk about cannabis.
Now or off the show, I wonder. Maybe both.
What's your view on what is happening in Canada, but also the opportunity that is actually crystallizing in the European market with the medicinal cannabis?
I would draw a distinction between the long-term provision of pharmaceutical cannabis subject to prescription, which has always been grown under license, and I think that the market will be sustained. I think that health authorities recognise that cannabis has important medicinal benefits, particularly for people suffering from long-term chronic pain, and that this will only be good news for patients. However, when I get onto the recreational use of cannabis, which is a much more contentious issue, I worry that actually the long-term use of cannabis may lead to an impairment of working populations, and I don't believe that this is necessarily a smart move, and I certainly don't think it's a move that will be embraced early in the UK.
No, particularly because of regulation, and it's quite the market is very uncertain, let's say, and maybe this is where the blockchain could come in to actually secure the provenance, you know, of the cannabis.
Steffi, I worry. Let's say that governments say, guys, it's fine, you can all smoke weed, and somebody then develops a disease that is directly associated with the use of cannabis. Will they turn around to government and say, you shouldn't have done that? It was inappropriate to allow us to take risks that actually you knew we were going to take and should not have happened. And I think that governments will be very wary of so doing.
Okay, so let's see how things progress, but you know, definitely we see lots of happening in the cannabis space. And to round up, do you want to say something about the mining sector? I wanted to pick up your brain on lithium and possibly uranium. First of all, with uranium, have we reached the tipping point or not yet?
I think that we are getting to the point where uranium is a must-have to be considered within portfolios, and that really relates to what I would see is going on in global climate change, that there is an increasing recognition that historic oil and gas is a dying industry. It is an eater of capital. It delivers really very poor incremental returns on capital employed. People know that we need sustainable, better energy, and we know equally that in terms of managing outages, we have to have nuclear as part of the cocktail. So to me, uranium is important. Lithium, in terms of batteries, is another key part of the solution, because we have to be able to store energy more efficiently than we have before. The other metal we have to talk about, of course, in all of this is copper. Because people think, oh yeah, well, look, copper is something to do with global economic cycles. And actually, I would say, copper is really to do with the electrification of the global economy. If we're going to go digital, we need copper.
Okay, and also maybe the oil price going up, it kind of slowed down the picking up of the uranium market as well.
Well, interestingly, I think that as the oil price goes up, so the incentive to find other sources of energy which are price competitive increases. So I would say a higher oil price ultimately is good news for uranium.
Okay, so you think we are going to see a transition very soon over the next couple of years?
Well, interestingly, I see the opportunity, but I worry that politicians are nervous of nuclear because of the very rare but occasional disaster that obviously hits the headlines. And politicians are saying to themselves, how much do I want to be the one who has signed the piece of paper that says we're going to have nuclear forever? Frankly, I think it's necessary and essential for the modern world. In meeting its energy needs to have nuclear, but politicians are wary as they are of so many things.
The problem is always you need to have the first one to do it, and then, the rest will follow up in anything.
And the first accident will put us back a couple of decades.
Yeah, sure. Well, hopefully that is not going to happen.
I know.
We always have to be positive, and look for progress.
Of course we do, and but people don't recognise that life
there
is
full of
risk.
There is always a risk. Yeah, there is always a risk.
And always opportunities, and it's a question of balance. And actually, we're going to have global energy. We're going to keep the lights on. We have to find ways forward, and nuclear will, in my view, have to be part of that solution.
So investing basically in natural resources is still a good opportunity at the moment.
Well, selectively, I think that uranium absolutely merits consideration, as does timber, as do sustainable energy, as does energy storage. I am very concerned, however, that oil and gas is now, as I say, a dying industry where the incremental return on capital employed is declining. And I think that as the oil stocks recover, investors should look at this as an opportunity to sell and not to buy.
Okay, thank you very much, James.
Thank you so much.
And I hope to see you soon in the studio when we have something, more hot to talk about, Brexit, any...
Always hot stuff to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is everything from the Financial Fox. See you next time.